Dharma talk is, it's complicated. I mean, not the title, but that is the title. It's complicated. It's so extremely simple, moment by moment, but it's so complicated when we look at all of this pile of stuff that's behind us called our past. We've done this, we've done that, this has happened, that's happened, then we did this, then we did that. And that's just this lifetime. And no, I'm not here to promote past lives. That's up to you. If you think that's the case, then go there. If you don't worry about it. So since it's so complicated, since we have so much difficulty dealing with all this complication, you know what I mean. When you're talking to your partner, your mate, your mom, your dad, brother, sister, your coworkers, it's complicated. You try to have a simple conversation about some simple situation, and all of a sudden you get overloaded by all of their ideas, their thoughts, their judgments about you, their opinions about this, that, and the other thing. It's complicated. But if you get sucked into that complication, then it's like trying to deal with a tornado by walking into it. Not a good idea. What can we do about that? So 2,500 years ago, the Buddha, the historical guy that this carving is supposed to represent, he left his kingdom, as the story goes. Who knows what really happened? And went into the forest and began to practice with other people who were trying to understand the nature of reality. And he discovered something about it. And he discovered that several things, but one of the things that he discovered is very simple, not complicated. This statement is very simple. Everything, that's a lot. That's the complicated part. Everything that looks like all of these separate things, our thoughts, our memories, our feelings, our what happened last Thursday, all the things that have ever been said to us by our brother, all the things we ever said back to our brother. That's a very simple one, and that's loaded. That's literally probably millions of words. All of that, the Buddha said, everything, count them. You can't. It's too many. You can't just start by the traditional word for a lot of things. Traditional metaphor is the sands of the Ganges, which is the river in India. Ganges, the sands of the Ganges. Quite a few little pieces of sand there. The Buddha said that everything is dependently arisen. Everything is dependent. You know what dependent is. Dependently arisen. It's dependently arisen. A thing by itself, anything, the last thought you had before I opened my mouth is dependent on all the other thoughts you've had, all the people you've listened to, everything you've done, everything that's been done to you, dependently arisen. Even your idea of who you are, yourself, your image of yourself, your persona, your identity, what happens when you say to somebody in conversation, well, I'm the kind of person that really likes rainbows. I don't like thunderstorms. Give me a rainbow anytime. So I'm the kind of person that, next time you say that, I'm the kind of person that, stop. Shut up. How's that? Shut up. I'm the kind of person, and then just let it trail off, and then look at the person you're about to say that to. See what happens on their face. They're not going to go, yeah, what kind of person are you? No, they're going to be in the same situation that you're in. Why? Because everything is dependently arisen. Every time you open your mouth, the other person depends, or you could use the word depends, on what you say so that they know what they're going to say. It's called a conversation. It's a rather foolish activity most of the time. Conversations are, they go round, unless you got a cup of coffee. And then if you got a cell phone that can interrupt the boring thing people are saying to you, just a minute, I got to check I have an important message here. You know what I mean? Dependently arisen. Everything that arises that looks like a singularity, looks like it has an identity, is dependent on everything, all these 10,000 things, the sands of the Ganges, I should say, dependently arisen. What are you going to do about that? What did the Buddha do about that 2,500 years ago? Where this lineage of Buddhism, which is not a belief system, Buddhists don't believe in Buddha. This is a really low-level kind of sixth grade understanding of what Buddhism is. Most people walk around with that presumption about Buddhism. Don't correct them. They're not ready for it. Unless they ask you, what is Buddhism? Then you might say, it's a spiritual path. And you could say it with a question mark at the end, just in case you're wrong. Very complicated. What did the Buddha looked at suffering. He looked at the cause of suffering, and he looked at if the possibility of suffering could come to an end, and he prescribed a path leading to that ending. So he saw suffering or difficulty or pain or discomfort of all kinds, which there, you name it. I mean, we could all come up with a short list. And he said, that's caused by desire. In other words, whatever is happening that you're suffering with is caused by wanting things to be different than they are. You don't want what is happening, you want something else. And this is this is what happens in order for there to become more suffering and more difficulty and more stress. We do it so much that eventually it becomes invisible and all we can see is the suffering, and we can't find the source of it because it's so complicated. It's very, very complicated. I'll say that again. Make sure everybody's listening. It's complicated. There's a great movie called It's Complicated. You should see it. It's quite funny. Much different than what I'm saying. Much funnier. So, life of suffering, the cause is desire or wanting things to be different. And this can come to an end. That was the third noble truth. And the last one is the way in which this can come to an end is through discipline and through meditation and through wisdom. Shila, Samadhi, and Prajna are the fancy Sanskrit words for it. Shila, Samadhi, and Prajna. Sit down, Shila, discipline, hold still, look at it, Samadhi, and see what's true, wisdom. See what is actually true. Nobody can tell you the truth. I mean, relative truth. Yes, I stole your lipstick. So they could tell you something like that. But they can't tell you what is ultimately true when it comes to life and death and what this whole situation of being a living being is really about. Religions, whether it's Islam, Judaism, Hinduism, Buddhism for that matter, all come up with some kind of idea about what this is. It's not, in Buddhism, it's not to be believed or disbelieved. You don't have to necessarily believe in this, believe in some kind of a guy who lived 2,500 years ago, but you could listen to what was said, and then you could see if that makes sense, if that makes sense to you on some level. Does it make sense to see that everything is dependently arisen? Is that something you can understand? If you begin to look and find any singularity, anything, and see that whatever you have is dependent on everything else. This is depending on the tree that it was carved from. And the shape of this is dependent on the carver. And the carver is dependent on his mother and father getting together at exactly a particular time to have him so that he could carve this later on. He was quite old when he did this. 12, I think. No, this is not a hash pipe. Probably going to be good. So what I'm saying is everything is dependently arisen. Everything that you can see that's a little tiny twinkling spot is dependent on everything else for its apparent appearance, including your thought patterns, including your mind, including your heart pumping, including anything you can find that's something that's what we call phenomena. Anything you can find, anything you can locate and single out. It could be something as difficult to actually locate as a thought. Have you noticed how you can't find a thought? You have them. We can't see the front of them. We can't see the back of them. We can't see the middle. We know we're having thoughts, but we're not exactly sure what those are. They don't kind of come in little packages, all tied up. So the Buddha, 2,500 years ago, said this is a way of approaching this suffering, this difficulty, and this dependent origination, which leads us to go in the circle, like chasing our tail, so to speak. He said, simplify this. the complicated part. And how do you do that? The only thing you have any real say-so over is your body. You notice you can't control your thoughts. If you could control your thoughts, you just have happy thoughts. You wouldn't even be here. You'd be probably out at the mall having happy thoughts. That's also called a 2-year-old. Happy, happy. So what he discovered in his life was that a way, and this could have been taught to him by someone else. We don't know if he stumbled onto it. Probably it was taught by his teachers. He had 2 of them. Sit down, hold still. This is the only, you can't find the mind, or you could just silence it or quiet it down or calm it down or say, like you would do to a dog, lay down or be quiet. So we can't do that with the mind, but we can find our body, and body and mind are not really separate. Again, dependently arisen. They look separate. It looks like you can drive to Walmart and think about driving to Kmart. There won't be a Kmart pretty soon. They're getting rid of those because of Amazon. So, but you notice how you can think about one thing, so you can divide it up somewhat. But fundamentally, if you continue to do that, you do it at some point where it gets so far apart that it's called, what is the word for that? Insanity, yes. Insanity. You're crazy. It's called schizophrenia. And if it bounces back and forth too fast, it's called psychosis. Fancy words that we don't use in Buddhism, but as a Buddhist monk, I can say whatever I want. And I'll also say, don't believe anything I say. Don't believe it. Don't disbelieve it. Don't believe it. Don't do anything with it. Listen. You're here. You might as well. So we can find the body. And what did the Buddha discover 2,500 years ago, as far as we know? And Buddhists down through the centuries, there's been hundreds of thousands of them, probably more. Sit down, hold still, and watch the complications. Don't add to them. Don't try to grab onto some of them and twist them around or manipulate them so that they simplify or so that they'll mind or so that you won't be plagued by anxiety or whatever. But find the mind. Find this mind by holding very still. And just observe what continues to move. Because what continues to move is your particular version of making things complicated. It's your particular version of adding things on. Something arises, maybe a thought or emotion or a memory from the past, and instead of just letting it rise and fall away like weather, we jump on it and we do something with it. We want to push it down. I don't want to think that. I can't be thinking that. Or I really like to think about it. I need to figure that out. I need to calculate. I need to figure things out. If you do that too much, your posture will change from this to this. This is not getting anywhere. So what am I saying? Hold the body in a very symmetrical position. Don't slouch. If you're slouching right now, which you could be, your mind takes on the same, like if I gave my Dharma talks like this. Hey, what up? All right. What's going on, man? If I did that, then my Dharma talk would take on that same shape. I'm not saying it wouldn't be okay. It would be kind of stupid. But it would probably also wouldn't be very helpful. So posture is very important. How you go out with her. Thank you. Posture is very important. How you hold your body. I'm not talking about being rigid, just saying very back straight, very still. The mind will, over time, will begin to align itself with that, what's it called? When both sides look the same? Symmetrical. Thanks. I know it was something like that. So your mind will take on a kind of symmetry, or the other fancy word for that is equanimity. The other one is balance, or equality, or sameness. What else?
Sameness and difference.
Yes, sameness and difference. It's the same, but it's different. So just like if you look at anyone's face, you'll notice the same, but if you look very closely, you'll notice no one has a symmetrical face. Everyone has one nostril slightly larger than the other one. Well, occasionally. Maybe it's you. You should cherish that instead of getting plastic surgery. So, your nose could be here, your nose could be this way. You could have, like with me, I have one eyelid hangs down, one eyelid comes up. That's deliberate. When I'm by myself, they're totally even. So this idea of simplifying, sitting down, holding still, and it's not something we're here to, it's not propaganda. I'm saying, check this out. See if this is something that would work for you. This is not for everyone to do. It's extremely difficult to add into your already busy life meditation practice or an awareness practice to somehow plug in even another hour a day. If you got 24 hours, sleep 7 or 8, 9 hours, and then you have your job, you have your other activity, and then it's really interesting how that other hour we can't quite give up that hour and just have only 23 left. Difficult. Excuse me, but you got to start somewhere. And if this is something that makes sense to you, that you want to do, then I highly recommend, if you're going to become a Buddhist, I do not care about that at all. That's up to you. But you could, at somewhere in your life, when you get up in the morning, you could find a spot where you could just sit down, simplify your mind, and how that feels at first, and possibly for the first several weeks, several months, maybe even years, depending on how many lifetimes you've been chasing around after something or running from something, same thing. Find some time, sit down, find a bell, get a water glass. That works. Not too much different. Strike the bell, hold still. And with an attitude of simplicity, approach or allow the complications to arrive. Be a good host or hostess. Be a good host. Receive whatever's coming. If you hold very, very still, this is a very dignified, upright, sane position. This is just about sanity. This is not about believing in this guy. It's not about any kind of belief, particularly. So hold very still and give everything your attention. Anything that moves, watch. Don't add to it. That shouldn't be moving. That shouldn't be happening. I shouldn't be thinking this. I shouldn't be feeling this way. As soon as you add on any kind of analysis to it, you make it what? More complicated, yes. And which means more circulars and more lifetimes. Chasing something, running from something, falling asleep behind the barn. We have a few minutes before the daily Dharma gathering. If you have questions, I'm happy to respond to them.
Are things only complicated because we make them complicated?
Well, that's certainly part of it, and it's because of wanting things to be different. Things might be 25% complicated, and because we enter into it and we're not willing to just let that be what it is, we want it different, we want it better, we want 12% complication. So when we hammer on it and think we can make it change, and that just causes more uproar. And why? Because we don't really see the entire situation. Before you act on anything, that's why I often say to people who consider themselves students of mine, don't do anything unless you have to. If you do something that you don't absolutely have to do, then you're probably doing it out of impulse or out of fear. Got to do something. Or out of hope. Maybe this will work. I think I'll go out to the casino. Somebody's got to win. Yeah, but it's not going to be you. Somebody's going to win because the odds against it are quite stacked. If you're going to go to the casino, at least go see an astrologer first and see if you're born a lucky person. Or a palm reader, that would work. More?
Not yet.
Mhm.
Earlier you said this makes sense. What did you mean by the message making sense?
What makes sense? What does?
Like the message, if it makes sense to us, maybe we should pursue it further.
I'm saying if you see, excuse me, if the words that I'm saying somehow click or align with what you've been dealing with in your life, if they don't, please don't do it. This is not propaganda. I'm not here to sell you anything. I don't have anything for sale. But what I'm saying is based on about half a century of doing this, getting close to it. And I'm just saying that sitting down, holding still, train the mind so you can see clearly, so you can be sane, so you don't have to answer to anybody. As my teacher, Kobunchina Roshi, said, get your own authority. Nobody just tells me what to do. I don't listen to anybody, but I also don't ignore anybody. I listen to everyone. I would have been here a lot sooner if it hadn't been for my wife. How's it feel to be blamed? No, I'm not blaming her. No, it was a mutual thing. Mary, you have a question?
Can you expand or maybe break down further the dependent origination? That has always been something that's hard for me to understand.
I think the simple way to do it, to try to understand one of the basic teachings of the Buddha is dependent origination. Everything is dependent on everything else for its apparent singularity or identity. Is that you can't, one of the best things to look at is look in the mirror, and whatever you're seeing there could not have happened. I mean, you didn't do it. You didn't born yourself. You couldn't do it. If you look there, you'll see that it's amazing, but you had your mother and your dad, two completely different people who were born different places and didn't even meet each other, more than likely, got together and you conceived you and you were born. So dependent, your singularity is dependent on theirs is dependent on someone else. Just human beings alone, not to mention turtles, frogs, and snakes. And everything else is dependent on everything else. So
Do
huh?
we have any? Can we affect that in any way? I mean,
Yes. And here's how you, thank you. Here's how you affect it. Stop meddling with it. Stop meddling with everybody. And don't ever give anybody any advice again. Please stop. Stop it. Because your advice is based on your own craziness. Your advice is based on your own confusion. I'll be giving the advice here. And of course, what am I saying along with what I'm talking about? I'm also saying don't do this unless you have to. So I'm saying I respect your intelligence and your clarity and your craziness. You have to respect both parts of any human being to really help them. You have to be with their craziness and stop trying to fix them. You have to be with that. This is what a really good mother or father does with their child. They don't meddle with them. They nurture them so they can grow up to be kind, loving beings. Now, this doesn't say that the lifetime before that they weren't a murderer. So you might have your work cut out for you there. Yes.
If a person feels that they have an epiphany, is that considered to still be dependent?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Anything that happens is dependent on everything else that's happening.
Right.
And an epiphany is fun. Whoa. What, that kind of epiphany?
Yeah.
Yeah, like,
Yeah,
whoa.
like, okay.
Yeah,
Like,
okay, got it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it could be dependent on what you smoke. And it could be dependent on aspects of your life that you never looked at before. It could have just come out of nowhere. It could be a religious epiphany. It could be some kind of spiritual understanding that has come to you. The thing with any kind of experience that comes to you, what? It will go away. Nothing lasts. The only thing that lasts is something that has not appeared. Now listen to me here. You'll learn a lot. I did. Something that arises has to go away. So anything that's happening to you that's arising, I don't care how wonderful, how magnificent, how great the feeling is, it's leaving on the afternoon train. It's leaving. It might stay there for 3 weeks. You might be able to keep it going for quite a while. but it does not last. It eventually caves in, crumbles, comes apart, just like our country is coming apart, just like the world is coming apart. This is not the first world, you know. There have been worlds from, how do I know? I don't know. That's how I know. If you know things, all the things you know blocks up all you're not knowing. If you grasp at your ideas and thoughts and opinions, you might as well be sticking leeches all over your face. Well, not exactly. A couple of leeches. You follow me? You're blocking up. So what doesn't arise, what arises goes away, but what doesn't arise can't go away. So what doesn't arise, listen to me, this is so important. This is an ultimate teaching, I'm telling you. I'm pointing out the nature of your mind right now. You ready? What does not arise does not go away. And who you actually are has not come into existence and cannot pass out of existence. It's called eternity, is a simple word for it. And it's always the case. The bodies come and go, but who you are can't go anywhere. Ha ha. Yes.
So if everything that arises and falls is dependent on something, what would be considered independent?
Independent would be not separate. If you see that who you actually are is not separate, then you are independent. And why are you independent? You want me to finish?
Please.
Because you're not separate. You'd have to be separated in order to be dependent on the other thing you're separated from. But if you're not separate from anything that arises, including everything that arises, you're not separate from it, then you're independent because there isn't anybody but you. It's just a relative way of saying it.
Okay. Thank you.
Contemplate that for the next 20, 30 years. You're young, what are you, 20?
23.
Another 23-year-old there.
What do you mean by relative?
Not absolute. Relative means there's more than one. There are the 10,000 things, the sands of the Ganges, or Ganges, I should say. Got to learn to pronounce that right. Somebody will be correcting me here. It's simple. Absolute doesn't come or go, doesn't move, doesn't do anything. Is there something you want to do?
Maria's?
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think this is previous talk. She has 3 questions, Maria from Toronto.
Yes, go ahead.
She asks, dropping awareness to my heart brings often an extreme pain. Is it just my pain or something of the larger nature?
I don't do multiple choice. So, but if I just take that as a question, I would say don't worry about it. Do it anyway. But do less. If it's painful, then just do it. Just take small bites of it. Return to it. Just basically do a breath awareness or whatever, Maria, whatever you're doing, and then occasionally make that movement. This means you're very sensitive. That's all. But do it anyway. A little bit. Go ahead.
Next question.
Next one.
Am I supposed to observe or feel?
Both. We go into there, and then we got concepts. So I would say, just go towards it. If it's a feeling, to be an observation. Just be with. This is based on something I did a little while ago. Is drop your mind in your heart. Come up out of your gut part. So don't think with your gut. Do it. Kill people. But you're going to kill anybody but out of your heart. You're killing yourself. So let this beat. It doesn't beat. The actual heart doesn't beat at all. Yes.
Another question. What is the relationship of heart between heart and mind?
Sometimes they're used sheen. There's sometimes there's a Chinese word, Japanese word. They're used interchangeably. They're brought together. When I say saying the thinking process, I am thinking about comparing, contrast on, and trying to navigate between success and failure. Kind of mind. And also dropping to the heart, and they're not dissimilar. one more question. Do we have one? Yes, sir.
What is the relationship between choice and everything being independent?
If you see that everything is dependent on rhythm, you just see that choice is choiceless. You really don't make choices. You don't make choices for you. Because you can't just suddenly out of nowhere decide to decide. It needs to be dependent. Things have to cause that to even be a choice for you. Move to Indiana. Something will arise and come. Let's move this way and that way, and then something all the causes of condition will come together. That will just as a potential place for you. And then you'll either not go choice, or you'll go choiceless. And the way it's choiceless is we don't really choose out of our clarity. We choose our confusion. I'm not saying it can't be a good choice. You can move there and you can say this is great, which makes it like choice work. It's still arisen. To be totally clear on what is always was, but then there's a clarity about you have about anything. It's called an authority, which is the discovery there. It's more of this secret teaching again. There is no authority. Unless there is, and that's no authority. It has to be done that way. We've tried to talk about it. We're relatively down. We're taking these kind of teachings and bringing them down to some kind of level where we play Scrabble. Right. From the point of view of choice, it's choiceless. You make choices, but the areas you make are based on they're based on your idea of value, which is but it comes from somewhere. Let's make this more than this. We go ahead and try to convince me that chocolate's better than vanilla. See how that works. You follow me? Being simplistic about that. It's that kind of thing that to show up. Don't choose the shape of your ears. You don't really choose those things. Those occur. We do. Yeah, it's based on conditioning. We have the ego. He, she, they are making a choice. You gotta make good choices. This is just word, yes, horseman. Now the people with completely good that are telling you good choices. They're a different paradigm, not incorrect. And you shouldn't look and say, it's better to this place than that place. It's better that this job. It's better that I stay out of that role. It's not so good for me when I get in there. I get in trouble. Saying that isn't happening. Of course, look at it. But the fundamental situation is to through sitting practice is to realize how this holds fundamentals. Go look in the mirror. This is the way I say. Go look in the mirror and say, here's the person's about to make choices. Well, who chose this person? Did you choose body? Did you choose this quotient? I mean, however you want to say it. And this is a little bit of things. Be a human being. Choice. Yes.
Based on this concept of independence, which you there's really spontaneity.
Spontaneity is a valuable, not impulsive. It's based on ego, and to be a show off. But spontaneity is if it's actually happening with everyone here, it's when you're actually acting out of no self. What? Because you're so used to some kind of a person identity or your modality happening identity. Spontaneity is all the time. That's the way I teach. I do what I'm going to say when I come in here. I just start running my mouth. People stay, so it must be okay. We're going to
close for daily harm.
So please stand, we'll dedicate the merit in the back of your blue chapel. And I'd also like to remind everybody, we do have donation boxes out in the hallway. Also, we take online through PayPal or Square. Any donations, all of your financial support you can give us is greatly appreciated.
May the merit of this penetrate into all places, so that we and every sentient being together can realize the Buddha's way. Ji-o-san, ji-shi. Shi-so-mu-sa-mu-ko-sa. The 10 directions, the 3 worlds, all Buddhas, all venerable ones, Bodhisattvas, Mahasattvas, the great Prajna, Paramita. O Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, the 10 directions and the 3 times, please hear us. Please come down out of the light and protect Sokukoji Buddhist Temple Monastery, our Sangha, families, friends, and visitors. Heal everyone who is unhappy, sick, or suffering, and fill them with light.